Hey guys, with Christmas coming up, it marks my annual journey back to rural Ohio to visit with my family and friends that live there. So, one of the things that kind of comes along with this is every time I go back, being, kind of the tech guy in the family, there's always a bunch of questions about, hey, how do I fix my computer? How do I get rid of this virus? Stuff like that. This year, it's a little bit more interesting as a lot of my nieces and nephews are kind of coming of age to the point where they need a computer. So naturally, my brothers and sisters started asking me, hey, I want to build them a computer, buy them a computer. What do you recommend? So me being the person that I am, 100% recommended, hey, we should build them a custom computer. So this year, I actually have three different computer builds that I need to make for some of my family and friends, as well as my nieces and nephews to kind of help them in their PC journeys. So I have three different computers at three different price points. So I thought it would be kind of cool to kind of have this little vlog series where I go through both the planning stages, the building stages, and then maybe a little wrap up video of showing them using it or getting some, comments from them or something like that. So I mentioned three different machines at three different price points. So I'm going to separate these out and call these Build A, Build B, and Build C. So Build A is the first gaming computer for my 8-year-old nephew. So this is being his first gaming computer. He's kind of just getting his feet wet in it. So we're doing a little bit lower budget here. So we're doing a budget of $750 for this one. So the second computer, which I'm calling Build B, or Facebook machine, is a computer I'm building for my aunt and uncle who are in their 60s. Pretty much they only need this to Facebook, maybe check some email, browse some web pages, not do much other than that. So their budget is a little bit cheaper at $500. Then the third build, and probably the one that's going to be the most fun, is for my 14-year-old nephew. So this is going to be a 1080p 60 FPS gaming rig. So this should be able to play pretty much everything at 1080p 60 FPS on like high or very high settings. So the budget for this is $1,500. Now, something that should be noted is Build A needs to include peripherals and so keyboard, mouse, and a monitor. Build B is just the tower, and then Build C is also a monitor and peripherals. So let's kind of get to some PC part picker lists, and I'll kind of go over what I've picked for each of the builds and why I picked them. Now, I will say all these prices here are not necessarily the prices I paid. So I bought all of this stuff around Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So we're a little bit after that now. So some of these prices are a little bit higher than I paid. So I actually got a pretty good deal. So I'll kind of give you a rundown of how much I paid for each of these. But so let's get to the builds. So first up is Build A. So this is the entry-level gaming computer for my 8-year-old nephew. So the heart of this computer is the Ryzen 3 1200. So I could have went with, the Ryzen 3 1300X, but to be honest, if you overclock the 1200, you pretty much get the same performance for a little bit cheaper, which is good. And I also could have maybe went something like, a Pentium or even a new i3 from Coffee Lake. The biggest problem with the i3 from Coffee Lake, even though it probably outperforms this a little bit, is you have to get, a Z370 motherboard now. Which is going to be a little bit more expensive, and they're kind of hard to find in stock. So I went with the Ryzen 3 1200. I think it's a really good entry level CPU for gaming. So now another thing too is the games he's going to play are probably going to be not super graphically intensive. So things like Rocket League, Overwatch, Minecraft, stuff like that. Stuff an 8-year-old would play. So I think a 1200 is a pretty good stuff for that. So went ahead and got a gigabyte motherboard here. So this was actually, these two were bundled together in my Black Friday deal that I found. So that's why I chose this gigabyte board, but it achieves everything we need to achieve. It's the right size for our case. No big deal. The next thing I got is I ended up getting some Ripjaws V-Series 8 gigabytes of RAM. So the reason I chose this RAM was A, it was cheap. B, it's from G-Skill, which I've used, tons of times throughout the years. Had a really good experience with G-Skill. And since it's one 8 gigabyte stick, the nice thing about this is in the future, if ever he needs to upgrade to 16 gigabytes, he can just, boom, buy another 8 gigabyte stick, throw it in there, bam, now you got 16 gigabyte. You probably lose a small amount of speed by going single channel versus dual channel, but it's not going to be enough to be really noticeable on this type of build, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. As for storage, I ended up going with, the tried and true SSD, small SSD for the operating system, and then a large SSD for, games, mass storage, movies, videos, any of that kind of stuff. I still think this, at this moment, is the best price to performance combo. Ideally, I would love to have gotten him something like a 500 gigabyte SSD and just say, hey, this is all you need. But with games nowadays being pretty large, you know, he can at least get the benefits, you know, faster boot times, faster application performance, faster Windows performance off of that SSD, while still, you know, having enough mass storage for his other stuff. The nice thing about this was I actually got this hard drive on a Black Friday deal, this 1 terabyte hard drive for $9.99. So you can see how crazy of a deal I got on that. I think the SSD I got for like $29.99 too. It was really cheap. So I got a great deal on those, and that's kind of the main reason to choose those. But I think getting, you know, that combo of like 120 gig SSD somewhere in that range is plenty of size for Windows applications like Steam, you know, anything else you would need to run, and then having that 1 terabyte drive for, you know, to install all your games on and stuff like that. So anyways, I think that's a good combination. So for video card, I ended up going with the RX 560. So it was pretty much for me coming down to, in this price point, so trying to keep monitor and everything, monitor, peripherals, and the entire tower for under $750. The main reason I went with the RX 560 is it was up between the 560 and the 1050. So the 1050 probably outperforms the 560 in most games. Now, granted, there are some games such as Doom is a good one that I know for sure that the 560 due to Vulkan outperforms a little bit of the 1050. The biggest reason is the fact that the 1050 has 2 gigabytes of RAM and the 560 has 4 gigabytes. The reason this is important is as games get more and more video RAM intensive as time goes on, I just feel like the 560 has a little bit more of runway due to the fact that it has 4 gigabytes instead of the 2 gigabytes on the 1050. Ideally, I would have loved to have gotten him the 1050 Ti, which has 4 gigabytes. The problem being is I ended up paying $99 for this on the Black Friday deal, and a 1050 Ti, the cheapest one I could find was like $129 or $139. It just couldn't fit in the budget. I ended up paying like altogether for this build like $740, so there was no room. For case, I ended up going with the Masterbox Lite. So I'll actually open this up. So the Masterbox Lite from Cooler Master. So the 3.1 is this one. They also have a 5, I believe. I've used this case a couple times. I actually have a review on my channel of this case. I still think as this point, this is the best budget case you can find. I mean, to get a full side panel window, to get customizable, so this red little trim you see here, and there's one on the bottom, it comes in the box with a red, a white, and a black one. Like front panel 3.1 USB, like good quality. Like I can't speak enough at how good a case this is for the price. I think right now, what's the price for it? $35. So I can find it on Black Friday. I found it for $19. So I ended up buying it for 2 of these builds just because it was A, incredibly cheap, and B, I've used it before, and I still think for $35 is an insanely good deal. For power supply, I pretty much went with the best 80 plus bronze that I could get for the budget, which was 550 watts. So I think I paid $29.99 or something like that for it on Black Friday. But again, Corsair makes good power supplies. It's 80 plus bronze, 550 watts, should be plenty for this build. What is PC Part Picker recommends 236. So yeah, so perfectly good on that. So now is where things got a little bit like tricky. So for keyboard and mouse, I wanted, like with all my PC building heart, to get him a mechanical keyboard. The problem is a good mechanical keyboard and a good mouse are going to run you like $150 combo. Like no problems, at least $150. So the issue is that just would have completely obliterated the $750 budget. So I ended up going with this Cooler Master Devastator 2 keyboard and mouse combo set. So number one is $29. Can't beat that price. Number two, I've actually used this before. One of my friends actually had this keyboard, and it's what they call, I think they call it membrane mechanical or like a hybrid switch. So it's a membrane switch, but each individual key is still like still an individual keycap. It's not like a full like molded and membrane keyboard, but it actually feels as close as I've felt to mechanical without actually being mechanical. So I definitely recommend this keyboard if you need something dirt cheap. So $29 for a keyboard mouse combo, and you want something that's a little bit better than your standard membrane keyboard. Plus, hey, it has LED backlit, so can't complain. So I ended up picking that up for him for $29. And then the last thing I got here was the monitor. So I went back and forth with a couple different monitors, and I wasn't sure, which one to get. So I ended up settling on this for a couple reasons. Number one, it's 24 inches, which he has a smaller desk at home, so I didn't want to go anything above 24, and I think anything smaller than 24 at 1080p is kind of not great. So 24 hit the sweet spot on size. The secondary thing is it's IPS, which just means you're going to have decent colors, good viewing angles, better than, a TN or a VA panel. And then the last thing is it's actually FreeSync compatible, which is great for that RX 560 that we got, and it can overclock to 75 hertz. So number one, maybe he's not going to be playing games at 75 frames per second on the 560. Well, the good thing is any game that he can take advantage of that 75 hertz. But also, since it has FreeSync enabled, anything that's going to run under that 75 hertz is going to be, pretty smooth down until he gets to around 30. So hopefully, this is a really good, I think, combination for the 560 is this 75 hertz monitor. So obviously 1920 by 1080, you're not going to want to go above 1080 with a 560, but yeah, so anyways, so right now it's coming out to like $749, which is actually pretty close to what I paid. So the only thing I don't have in here is Windows. So I'm just assuming Windows cost being around $50. I buy it on kingwin.net. You've probably seen that on like everybody else's tech YouTube channel. I'll put a comment or a link to it in the description. But it's a place where you can buy Windows for a little bit cheaper. So right now it goes for around like $30 to $50, something like that, depending on what Windows versions you buy. So you can add, another $50 on top of that. So it'll come out to about $800. So with all the Black Friday deals, I ended up getting this for around $740. So yeah, so again, not well within, but within our $750 budget. And for the goal of a first gaming computer, I think this really checks all the boxes. Definitely the fact that I was able to swing an SSD in here, I think will really impress him. Like, he's gonna run Windows and he's gonna be like, man, this feels so fast. I think right now all he has is a really old laptop that he uses sometimes for like school projects and stuff like that. So next up, we got the $500 Facebook email web browsing machine. So this one, there's not too much to go into. I just kind of wanted to go over quickly what I ended up getting for it and why I got those things. So I ended up going with a Pentium G4600 dual core processor. Pretty much I just said, okay, for $500, I knew for sure that I wanted to go SSD. So since they're going to be pretty much only doing stuff in the operating system, running programs like, mail and web browsing and stuff like that, I wanted to make sure that I got them an SSD only storage option, just so that way they could really feel a snappy experience when working around in Windows. So that was kind of actually the centerpiece of this build. I started with that 480 gig SSD. Then I ended up, I mentioned before that I got the Cooler Master Box Lite again. So granted, they're in their 60s. They probably don't care about a side panel window, but I mean, even getting a case with less kind of flashy gamery stuff, you're still going to be of good quality. You're still going to be paying at least $39. Again, I had it on sale for $19.99, so just went ahead and snagged it. So yeah, so I ended up going with the G4600. It was kind of the best CPU that I could get for the price of this build. Also, I found it with a combo with this MSI B250 motherboard, so I ended up scooping those both up. Again, same RAM as on the previous build. One 8GB stick for that same reason is later in the future now I can bump that up to 2 if they ever start running into issues with using too much RAM, too many Chrome tabs. But anyways, I can always grab them another 8GB stick, slide it in there, boom, now they're at 16. So anyways, yeah, power supply, I went with the 450 watt bronze. So the Corsair CX power supplies were all like on super sale for Black Friday. So I got this, I think for like $19.99 or something, really good price. So yeah, it comes out to like $448. So this is pretty close to what I paid. I paid around $450 when you include Windows on including all those Black Friday deals. But again, if you're building a computer for somebody older, you want to make sure you don't want to overclock, you don't want to do anything crazy like that. You just want something that's like a standard build with maybe a little bit of runway in the future. So I gave them, the little bit of runway with the 8GB stick, one stick, so you could add another one in the future. And then number 2, I went with the, all SSD storage option. They don't need more than 480 gigabytes. They're not doing crazy, they're storing movies or games or anything like that. And that's going to give them, a really, really snappy experience in the operating system, which I think is probably the most important thing for them. So yeah, so that's kind of where I went to with that case. So the third thing, or the third build in this one is more, there was a little more options, a little more leeway for this. It was the most fun to kind of pick everything out. I mean, the $750 gaming build was also fun, but for different reasons. That one was fun because it was like, oh man, how can I get something good for this cheap of a price? Where this one, the budget being $1,500 left me with a lot more options of, well, I can afford these two things. Which one is better or which one works best with this build? So I went with a couple different options here that might seem a little confusing, but I'll kind of try to explain them why I went. So starting off, I went with an Intel Core i5 7500. So the question might be, oh man, why didn't you go Ryzen, or why didn't you go Coffee Lake, or any of those things? So the main thing here was my brother. So this is for remember, a 14-year-old nephew. So my brother, his dad, told me, hey, I wanted this machine. I want it for $1,500 or less, and I want it to be low maintenance. So that was one of his requests, was pretty low maintenance. He's not really a big tech guy. He didn't want to do anything with it. He didn't want there to be many problems, so he wanted to go very low maintenance. So one of the first things that meant to me was, okay, I can't overclock. If I want to overclock, then, what happens if the overclock fails, starts getting blue screens, cooling fail, there could be a lot of issues. So first thing that I want to do is I want to cut out overclocking. So that was why I ended up with the 7500. I could have went Ryzen. The problem with Ryzen, I think if you don't overclock Ryzen, you're really losing out on gaming performance, because I think the stock speeds are around 3 to 3.4 gigahertz or something like that, where this 7500 with the Asus multi-core enhancement, which is on by default anyways, you're gonna hit, I think it's a 3.9 turbo. Does it mention turbo in here? Yeah, 3.8. So you're going to hit 3.8 on all 4 cores. So that's going to be really good for gaming. So the secondary thing, again, like I mentioned before, no overclocking, but if I want Coffee Lake, I would have to get an overclocking motherboard. I'd have to pay more for that. And also Coffee Lake is hard to find the Coffee Lake stuff in stock currently. So instead, I went with the 7500, saved a couple dollars, and also got a nice combo with this motherboard. So another thing is, even though this comes with a stock Intel cooler, we had it in the budget for, a Hyper 212 Evo. It's one of the best coolers out there for, a cheap price. I think I got it for $20 on Black Friday instead of $30.99. So I went ahead and snagged that. It's just going to keep things running cool. It's going to look a little bit better, be a little bit quieter than the Intel stock cooler, and just increase the longevity of that part, just in case, let's say he puts his tower on the ground, there's crappy airflow, stuff like that. As for motherboard, I went with the Asus Strix. So one of the reasons, a couple different reasons. Number one, it was bundled with the 7500, so I found it for there, which was good. Number two is it kind of looks good, if you ask me. I think it's a good looking motherboard for the price, especially for like a B250 motherboard. Has all the features that we're looking for, has good amount of I/O, stuff like that. That was kind of the main reasons I picked that. Asus is my favorite motherboard brand personally. I've used a lot of different motherboard brands. I've had the least problems with Asus. I like their BIOS the best, so that was one of the reasons I went with that. And again, I got it for a good price because it was in a combo deal with the 7500. As for the RAM, since this is, a little bit higher budget and my brother wanted it to last a little bit longer, hence, why he went with the higher budget, I ended up going with 16 gigabytes of RAM instead of 8 gigabytes like I did on the other machines. Nice thing about this is, again, G-Skill, which I've used before, very tried and true. I'm very happy with them as a brand, so I will definitely continue to use those. Secondary thing, red and black matches the motherboard, so it kind of, matches the theme here. The theme is mainly red, black, and white. So there's a little bit of white on here, a little bit of red, a little bit of black. I think these RAM modules look cool. They have good reviews. I've used them before. And, we were able to get 2 sticks, so we can, hit the dual channel, get the best speed. As for storage, so he's going to be using this for games, but, talking to him, one of the things that I wanted to get from him was, is it going to matter if you, have to uninstall and reinstall games sometimes? Or do you want to, just have them all installed all the time? So he said he would much rather have faster performance and then not worry about the hassle of uninstalling and reinstalling games. So I ended up going with 850 EVO 500 gig. So 850 EVO, one of the best price per performance SSDs out there. Really good performance. I use an 850 EVO on my personal rig. Really good. So I ended up going with the 500 gig, which should be enough for him to not need the mass storage and give him a really fast experience, no matter if it's loading games or running applications or, anything like that in the operating system. So that's why I ended up going with that, and then no mass storage. Now, if he starts running out of space and it's really becoming an issue, it's not that hard to just, snag a 1 terabyte hard drive or a 2 terabyte hard drive and just slot that in there. So that gives him, a little bit of an upgrade path. It's definitely harder to go from just a hard drive to an SSD, mainly due to the fact that if you had Windows installed on your mass storage hard drive, it would be, kind of a pain to try to move that over. You'd have to uninstall and reinstall, do a bunch of stuff like that. So that's why I went with just the SSD. Now for graphics cards, this is the one where that it kind of got me. So at first I was like, man, $1,500 budget, no issue. I'll get a 1070, kind of the best, one of the best bang for your buck cards out there right now. The biggest problem with the 1070 was The cheapest one, I mean, the prices are kind of through the roof right now. The cheapest one I could find, I think, was like 420 or 410 or something like that. So a solid $100 more than I think I paid for this. I think I paid $299 altogether for this. So obviously has better performance for 10 versus the 1066 gig. The biggest problem was once you factor in monitors and keyboard and mice and having a nice case, he really cared about the way the case looked. That was important to him. So, you know, waging all those factors together, I ended up going with the 1066 gig. So pretty much what did that mean? Well, it ended up saving money because with the 1070, I was thinking, okay, maybe a 1440p monitor, stuff like that. So so it ended up saving some money around the end and allowed us to come in, you know, or more around like 1450, I think, or 1400 was around the budget. So getting a little bit under was ideal. So we ended up going with this 1066 gig. So I actually have this card in my wife's computer. This card works really well, overclocks decently. And since it's the 1066 gig with the extra CUDA cores over the 3 gigabyte, it's got plenty of VRAM, and you know it'll just like run pretty much everything at high or very high at 1080p. So that's going to be great. No issues there. As for case, so we ended up going with the Corsair Crystal 460 RGB. So cool thing about this case is it's all tempered glass around the side. So that was something that obviously looks really cool. You can see the internals, and it comes with 3 RGB fans, which is, you know, something that's kind of cool. You can kind of customize it whatever you want. So I think it's just a really good looking case. And you know, this since we're not overclocking, having really good airflow, which this case doesn't have, isn't so much of a big deal. So we ended up going with something that mainly for looks. For power supply, again, so being a little bit higher budget and low maintenance, I didn't want there to be issues with the power supply. So I ended up going 650, which is definitely above the wattage that we need for this system, but plenty of good wattage, and it's 80 plus gold. So, you know, again, I'm going for stability on here. I want to make sure everything runs good and, you know, low maintenance. For monitor, so this is where things got a little bit interesting. So I ended up, so even though we had about an extra $100 in the budget, I ended up going with the same monitor that we went for the budget build. And here's the reasons why. So I know everybody's gonna be like, it's a FreeSync monitor. Why'd you buy that with an NVIDIA GPU? Well, here's the thing. Number one, I couldn't find a better 1920 by 1080 monitor that went above 60 hertz. Okay, so pretty much outside of this monitor, the next jump up was like 144 hertz. Well, the problem with all the 144 hertz monitors is a couple things. Number one, they're all TN panels for the most part, or VA panels, so they don't look as good colors wise or viewing angles wise. Number two, they also obviously cost more, so we'd be, you know, really coming up with that $500 or $1,500 budget. Third problem is that the 1060 is not going to be running games at very high and high at 144 hertz at 1080p. You know, it might get some around 100 possibly, but you really need the 1070 in order to get that 144 hertz. So instead, I went with the 75 hertz monitor. So we can, even though it's not, you know, we're doing an NVIDIA GPU and this is a FreeSync monitor, it doesn't matter. You can still run it at 75 hertz, doesn't matter. So we'll run it at 75 hertz. He'll be able to most likely hit that 75 hertz limit with his 1066 gig, which means that, you know, the lack of FreeSync or G-Sync is not really that big a deal. Also, again, he has a smaller desk, so 23 inches is a good fit for that. All in all, for the price, it ended up being a really good choice. So this one being, you know, a little bit more higher budget, we're actually able to get some better peripherals, if you ask me. So we're going to go with the Corsair Harpoon RGB wired optical mouse. It's RGB. He can customize it to make it match his RGB fan. So maybe he wants to go red on his Corsair case. He can go red on his mouse or whatever he wants that. This mouse, you know, in my opinion, is a really, really good budget gaming mouse. Feels good, works well. No complaints. As for the keyboard, we went with this Logitech G413 Carbon wired keyboard. So it's got Cherry MX keys. We went with reds. It's got red backlit. All in all, again, a good price. I gave him a couple different options as the one he liked the best. So that's why we ended up going with it. Also, you know, really good price. So yeah, so that's kind of the $1,500 machine. I think it's going to be pretty much run everything at 1080p, 60 FPS plus at very high, or high, very high. Should be no issue right there. No bottlenecking. I think all these parts go together really well. So yeah, so that's kind of the third build. So the next step of this kind of vlog video series is I'm going to go home, I think next week, so December 9th I fly out. So sometime over Christmas and in the holiday area, I'm going to be building all these machines. I'll take some video of it, kind of show off the builds, what they look like when they're done, and yeah, and then kind of maybe get some wrap up footage and put together some more videos of the series. But hopefully, this was interesting to you guys. I think showing, 3 distinctly different builds as well as 3 different price points, and kind of hopefully if you're making a build for yourself or making a build for a friend or family, this can kind of give you some inspiration. Don't worry about necessarily picking the exact same parts, because prices may change, parts get upgraded, but I think about it more of like, okay, why did I pick an SSD for this system? Or why did I pick this graphics card for this system? Why did I marry this graphics card to this CPU? Those are the kind of things, like, I think it's really hard when you're budgeting and planning to kind of weigh the different options, because it's like, if you go a cheaper CPU, then you can get a better GPU. But if you get a better GPU, then is that CPU bottlenecking it? There's a lot of questions around that. So hopefully this kind of puts some insight into the PC part picking process. But anyways, yeah. So stay tuned. There'll be definitely a part 2, maybe even a part 3, where I show building these machines and kind of running through them, and maybe giving off some of the performance afterwards of where they're running games and stuff like that. But anyways, yeah. So hope you liked it, and stay tuned for more videos.